Do you know the story of humanity's journey to the moon begins not in space, but on Earth, amid political tension, technological ambition, and global rivalry? In the aftermath of World War II, two superpowers emerged, the United States and the Soviet Union. Their competition, known as the Cold War, extended far beyond military strength that reached into science, technology, and ultimately space. This period gave birth to what became known as the space race. The Soviet Union made the first major move in 1957 by launching Sputnik 1, the world's first artificial satellite. This small US sphere orbiting Earth shocked the United States and demonstrated that the Soviets had advanced rocket capabilities. It marked the beginning of a new era where space became the ultimate frontier of competition. In response, the United States accelerated its own efforts, leading to the creation of NASA in 1958. The goal was clear: to catch up and eventually surpass the Soviet Union in space exploration. The Soviets continued their early dominance. In 1961, they achieved another historic milestone when Yuri Gagarin became the first human to travel into space, orbiting Earth aboard Vostok 1. This achievement intensified the pressure on the United States. Just weeks later, the U.S. made its own attempt with Alan Shepard, who became the first American in space. Although his flight was suborbital, it signaled that the U.S. was ready to compete. Amid this growing rivalry, a bold vision was announced. On May 25, 1961, John F. Kennedy addressed Congress with a historic challenge: to land a man on the moon and return him safely to Earth before the end of the decade. At the time, this goal seemed almost impossible. Humanity had barely begun to explore space, and the moon was still a distant, mysterious world. Yet, this declaration transformed the space race. Massive resources were invested into research, engineering, and astronaut training. New technologies had to be invented, tested, and perfected. Rockets grew more powerful, computers more advanced, and missions more complex. The early programs Mercury and Gemini served as stepping stones. They tested human survival in space, orbital maneuvers, and docking techniques, skills that would later be essential for a lunar mission. This period from 1945 to 1961 was not just about competition, it was about possibility. It marked the moment when humanity began to seriously consider leaving Earth and stepping onto another world. The race to the moon had begun. After the bold commitment by John F. Kennedy, the United States faced an enormous challenge: turning a dream into reality within less than a decade. The responsibility fell on NASA, which had to overcome technical, Arabic, Alif Arabic, Noon Arabic, Sin Arabic, Alif Arabic, Noon Arabic, Farsi, and financial obstacles never before encountered. The journey toward the moon was not direct. It was built step by step. The first stage was Project Mercury, which aimed to send humans into space and bring them back safely. Astronauts like John Glenn proved that humans could survive and function in orbit. These early missions were critical in understanding the effects of space travel on the human body. Next came Project Gemini 1965-1966, which focused on mastering the techniques required for lunar missions. Astronauts practiced spacewalks, orbital docking, and long-duration flights. These skills were essential for the complex maneuvers that would be required to reach the moon. However, progress was not without tragedy. In 1967, a devastating accident occurred during a ground test of Apollo 1. A fire inside the spacecraft killed 3 astronauts, Gus Grissom, Ed White, and Roger B. Chaffee. This tragedy forced NASA to pause and reevaluate its safety measures. Despite the setback, the program continued with renewed determination. Engineers redesigned spacecraft systems, improved safety protocols, and refined mission plans. The next missions, Apollo 7, 8, 9, and 10, tested various aspects of the journey, including orbiting the moon and practicing lunar landing procedures. By early 1969, everything was in place. The stage was set for the mission that would change history forever, Apollo 11. By mid-1969, nearly a decade after John F. Kennedy set the ambitious goal of landing a human on the moon, the United States stood on the edge of one of the most daring missions in human history. Years of preparation, testing, failure, and innovation had led to a single moment, the launch of Apollo 11. On July 16, 1969, at exactly 9:32 a.m. local time, the powerful Saturn V lifted off from Kennedy Space Center in Florida. Towering over 110 meters tall, it remains one of the most powerful rockets ever built. Millions of people around the world watched the launch live or followed it through radio broadcasts, aware that history was unfolding before their eyes. Inside the spacecraft were 3 astronauts: Neil Armstrong, the mission commander, Buzz Aldrin, the lunar module pilot, and Michael Collins, the command module pilot. Each had undergone years of intense training to prepare for the unknown challenges ahead. The launch sequence was flawless. As the Saturn V rocket thundered into the sky, it marked not just the beginning of a mission, but the culmination of human determination. Within minutes, the rocket stages separated as planned, and Apollo 11 entered Earth orbit. After a final systems check, the spacecraft performed a maneuver known as translunar injection, sending it on a trajectory toward the moon. The journey through space took approximately 3 days. During this time, the crew conducted routine checks, communicated with mission control, and prepared for the critical phases ahead. The spacecraft consisted of 2 main components: the command module, named Columbia, where Collins would remain, and the lunar module, named Eagle, which would carry Armstrong and Aldrin to the moon's surface. On July 19, 1969, Apollo 11 entered lunar orbit. The moon, once a distant and mysterious object in the night sky, now filled the astronauts' view. Its surface, covered in craters and shadows, appeared both beautiful and unforgiving. The crew orbited the moon multiple times, carefully studying the landing site and preparing for descent. The most dangerous part of the mission was about to begin. On July 20, 1969, Armstrong and Aldrin transferred into the lunar module Eagle and separated from Columbia. As Collins remained in orbit, alone around the moon, the Eagle began its descent toward the surface. The landing was far from easy. As the module approached the moon, computer alarms began to sound. These alarms indicated that the onboard computer was overloaded, an issue that could have forced an abort. However, after rapid analysis, Mission Control determined that it was safe to continue. Then another problem emerged. The original landing site was found to be unsafe, filled with large rocks and craters. Armstrong took manual control of the spacecraft, guiding it away from danger. With fuel running critically low, less than 30 seconds remaining, he searched for a safe place to land. Finally, at 20:17 UTC on July 20, 1969, Armstrong announced the historic words, "Houston, Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed." For the first time in human history, a spacecraft had successfully landed on another world. The tension in Mission Control erupted into celebration. Across the globe, millions of people listened as humanity achieved what once seemed impossible. Hours later, Armstrong prepared to exit the lunar module. On July 21, 1969, he descended the ladder and became the first human to step onto the moon. As he placed his foot on the lunar surface, He spoke the words that would echo through history. That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. Shortly after, Aldrin joined him on the surface. Together, they spent approximately 2.5 hours exploring the moon. They collected samples of lunar rock and soil, set up scientific experiments, and planted the American flag. They also left behind a plaque bearing a message of peace, stating that they came for all mankind. Meanwhile, Collins continued orbiting above, maintaining the command module and preparing for their return. The success of the landing was not just a national achievement, it was a global milestone. It demonstrated the power of human innovation, collaboration, and determination. After completing their tasks, Armstrong and Aldrin returned to the lunar module, which later lifted off from the moon's surface and docked with Collins in orbit. The crew then began their journey back to Earth. The most dangerous phase had been completed successfully. The moon, once unreachable, had been touched by human hands. After the successful landing of Apollo 11 on the moon's surface, the most iconic and historic phase of the mission began, the moonwalk. This was the moment humanity had dreamed about for centuries, setting foot on another world. Following a brief rest period inside the lunar module Eagle, Neil Armstrong prepared to exit the spacecraft. On July 21, 1969 UTC, he carefully descended the ladder and became the first human to walk on the moon. His famous words, "That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind," were broadcast live to millions of people around the globe. Shortly after, Buzz Aldrin joined him on the lunar surface. Together, they spent about 2 hours and 31 minutes outside the lunar module, conducting experiments, collecting samples, and documenting their experience. The environment they encountered was unlike anything on Earth. The moon's surface was covered in fine gray dust, later known as lunar regolith. The gravity was only about 1/6 of Earth's, allowing the astronauts to move in slow, bouncing steps. The sky above them was completely black, even during daylight, due to the absence of an atmosphere. Despite the beauty of the moment, the mission was highly technical and time-sensitive. One of their primary objectives was to collect lunar samples. Armstrong and Aldrin gathered approximately 21.5 kilograms of rocks and soil, which would later be studied by scientists to better understand the moon's composition and origin. These samples provided critical evidence supporting theories about how the moon was formed. They also set up several scientific instruments on the surface. These included a seismometer to detect moonquakes and a laser reflector that allowed scientists on Earth to measure the distance between Earth and the moon with remarkable accuracy. These experiments continued to provide valuable data long after the mission ended. In addition to scientific work, the astronauts carried out symbolic actions. They planted the American flag on the moon, a moment that became one of the most recognizable images in history. However, the mission was presented not as a claim of ownership, but as an achievement for all humanity. A plaque left on the lunar module read, "We came in peace for all mankind." During their time on the surface, Armstrong and Aldrin also received a live phone call from Richard Nixon, who congratulated them on behalf of the United States and the world. This moment highlighted the global significance of the mission. Meanwhile, orbiting above them in the command module Columbia, Michael Collins performed a critical and often overlooked role. He maintained the spacecraft monitored systems and prepared for the rendezvous that would be essential for returning home. For several hours, Collins was the most isolated human being in existence, alone on the far side of the moon with no direct communication with Earth. After completing their tasks, it was time to leave. The lunar module's ascent stage lifted off from the moon's surface, leaving behind its lower section. Armstrong and Aldrin successfully rejoined Collins in lunar orbit, docking with the command module. This maneuver required precise timing and flawless execution. Any error could have stranded them on the moon. Once reunited, the crew prepared for the journey back to Earth. On July 22, 1969, Apollo 11 began its return trajectory. The trip back took approximately 2.5 days. During this time, the astronauts conducted final system checks and prepared for re-entry. Re-entry into Earth's atmosphere was one of the most dangerous phases of the mission. Traveling at extremely high speeds, the command module had to withstand intense heat generated by atmospheric friction. A protective heat shield ensured the safety of the crew as they descended toward the ocean. On July 24, 1969, Apollo 11 safely splashed down in the Pacific Ocean, where recovery teams quickly reached the capsule. The astronauts were retrieved and placed into quarantine as a precaution to ensure that no unknown lunar contaminants posed a risk to Earth. The mission was a complete success. For the first time in history, humans had traveled to another celestial body, walked on its surface, and returned safely home. The moon was no longer just a distant object in the sky. It had become a place humanity had visited. The achievements of Apollo 11 extended far beyond the mission itself. It demonstrated the power of science, engineering, and international cooperation. It inspired generations of scientists, engineers, and dreamers. The moon landing was not just a victory for one nation, it was a milestone for all of humanity. The successful return of Apollo 11 on July 24, 1969, marked not just the end of a mission, but the beginning of a new chapter in human history. For the first time, humanity had stepped beyond Earth and returned safely, a milestone that redefined what was possible. The immediate global reaction was overwhelming. Millions of people around the world followed the mission in real time. When Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin walked on the moon, it was more than a national achievement. It was seen as a victory for all mankind. Messages of congratulations poured in from leaders across the globe, emphasizing unity during a time otherwise defined by Cold War tensions. The mission fulfilled the bold promise made by John F. Kennedy in 1961. Within just 8 years, what once seemed impossible had been achieved through determination, innovation, and collaboration. It demonstrated that human beings, when driven by a clear goal, could overcome extraordinary challenges. But the impact of the moon landing extended far beyond symbolism. Technologically, the Apollo program accelerated advancements in computing, engineering, materials science, and telecommunications. Many of the technologies developed during this era later found applications in everyday life, from improved electronics to medical equipment. Scientifically, the lunar samples brought back by Apollo 11 and later missions provided valuable insights into the moon's origin. They supported the widely accepted theory that the moon was formed from debris following a massive collision between Earth and another celestial body billions of years ago. The success of Apollo 11 also paved the way for further exploration. Between 1969 and 1972, NASA conducted additional lunar missions, each expanding our understanding of the moon. However, after Apollo 17, human missions to the moon came to an end, largely due to high costs and shifting political priorities. Despite this pause, the dream of lunar exploration never disappeared. In recent years, new programs such as NASA's Artemis initiative aim to return humans to the moon and establish a long-term presence. This time, the goal is not just to visit, but to build a foundation for future missions to Mars and beyond. However, alongside its achievements, the moon landing has also been the subject of controversy. Over the decades, some individuals have questioned whether the landing actually occurred, suggesting it was staged. These claims, often referred to as moon landing conspiracy theories, have circulated widely, especially in the age of the Internet. It is important to address these claims critically. The evidence supporting the moon landing is extensive and well documented. It includes photographs, video recordings, lunar samples, and data collected during the mission. Independent tracking by other countries, including the Soviet Union at the time, confirmed the mission's Arabic, Noon Arabic, Jim Arabic, Alif Arabic, Het. Additionally, the scientific instruments left on the moon, such as laser reflectors, are still used today. Experts in science, engineering, and history overwhelmingly agree the moon landing was real. Understanding these debates is important, not to give equal weight to unsupported claims, but to emphasize the value of evidence-based thinking and scientific verification. Ultimately, the legacy of Apollo 11 is not just about reaching the moon, it is about what that achievement represents. It represents curiosity, the desire to explore the unknown. It represents courage, the willingness to take risks in pursuit of knowledge. And it represents unity, the idea that humanity can come together to achieve something greater than itself. Today, more than half a century later, the image of a human footprint on the moon remains one of the most powerful symbols in history. It reminds us that boundaries are meant to be challenged and that even the most distant dreams can become reality. Do you think humans should return to the moon or go straight to Mars next? If you enjoyed this incredible journey to the moon, make sure to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful historical documentaries.